you've probably seen this meme of that memo Michael Jordan sent that he was coming back to basketball. It just said, "I'm back." Right? That's kind of how Democrats feel right now, sort of, with some of them hoping that massive surprise win to protect abortion access in conservative Kansas is a sign that maybe they have a shot at holding on to the House and the Senate in the midterms. But can a vote on abortion translate to a vote for Democrats in November? President Biden seems to think so, seems to hope so. Ahead, we're live in Kansas with new details on that, plus the new executive order from the White House. And a law and order moment in the Alex Jones trial today. How cell phone records his lawyers accidentally gave to their opponents could shake up this case. Plus, more drama on the golf circuit. That new lawsuit showing how Phil Mickelson and others who left the PGA Tour may be trying to have their cake and eat it too. Plus, we're getting a behind-the-scenes look at flaws in the organ transplant process, how one reporter got some exclusive government documents in the backstory. And imagine having $90 million and then lighting it on fire. That's basically what happened to the Batgirl movie that's never going to see the light of day. We'll talk about what's keeping it off the big screen and all of the other screens later on in the show. Hey, I'm Hallie, and right now Democrats are trying and hoping and pushing to capture and capitalize on momentum around abortion access, pointing to that surprise vote overnight in conservative Kansas that protects abortion rights there, and basically saying, hey, we still have a chance. And what happened in this election might say a lot about the next one. That's not lost on President Biden. Check it out. You see him there. He's in the screen on the corner of your screen. He's virtual because, of course, he still has COVID, using today to highlight abortion access with the new executive order to help people travel out of states where the procedure is illegal. And in the process, laying out the message I bet you're going to hear a lot in the months to come.
Voters of Kansas sent a powerful signal that this fall the American people will vote to preserve and protect the right and refuse to let them be ripped away by politicians. And my administration has their back.
You are seeing here the jubilation, the excitement, the reaction from folks who support abortion rights in Kansas after the results came in from that referendum, that big win for them.
So grateful and just overjoyed in this moment right now.
I'm really proud that our state came through and decisively won.
I'm just excited that I know that I and my loved ones can get the health care that we need and that we deserve.
And if I may be so bold and so honored to put on my Steve Kornacki hat for a second, we've got a couple of reasons why Democrats may have a point. First, the no vote, which means here, no, don't take abortion access away. That side won by nearly 20 points, and that's being driven by turnout, which just exploded. We crunched the numbers, okay, and more folks showed up than the 2014 and 2018 primaries combined. So it's clear people wanted to vote on this. But there's also a practical impact. Look, Kansas is a red state in a sea of other red states. It's the closest with an abortion provider for people in Houston, in Dallas, in Austin, or in Oklahoma City. Check out this map. Right now, a person who wants an abortion has to travel 2 hours to the nearest provider in Wichita, Kansas. If the other side had won on this vote, the travel times would have tripled to Nebraska or to Iowa. But those states have bans in the works right now, so it really could have been 4 times as far to Colorado, to New Mexico, to Illinois. Advocates say this is a lifeline then, not just for Kansans, but for people all over the region who may need an abortion for whatever reason. We're live on the ground in Kansas with Dasha Burns in just a second. But I want to start at the White House with NBC's senior White House correspondent Kelly O'Donnell. And Kelly, this executive order was signed by the president. It was a notable moment that's making headlines because he is putting abortion access front and center. But it is also a reminder that the White House, the executive branch, can only go so far.
Exactly, Hallie. Presidential powers are limited on an issue like this, but here's where he can use persuasion by talking about the issue, and his executive order does direct the Department of Health and Human Services to examine ways that Medicaid, which is a joint state and federal program, can use some of the benefits therein to try to help women with transportation from a state where abortion would not be legal to a state where it is legal, to provide those kinds of cost savings by looking for ways to cover transportation as well as medical benefits, also looking for ways to make certain that in cases where there might be a disagreement between medical physicians and state law on the kind of care a woman might need. For example, if the law now says certain procedures can't be done, but for the health of that woman, the doctor would like to have a certain procedure done, federal law can step in. And so the Department of Health and Human Services will lay out over the next 30 days a plan of action there. That's what the president's executive order does. It doesn't set into motion anything today with a stroke of a pen, but it directs the department to set up a plan. And this is addressing a piece of the abortion access puzzle, and it allows the administration to be talking about this issue and to be putting its focus on this issue as promised by the president and this administration, and that keeps certainly this issue front and center. They did not anticipate that the result in Kansas would be resounding as it is, and that ties together very much, as you heard in the president's words. Hallie?
There's another factor here, too, Kelly, and you've alluded to it, the president alluded to it, and it was the politics one, because this is now proof, right, that in a red state, abortion can drive people to the polls. At the same time, come November, it is not just abortion on the ballot. It is the economy. It is inflation. Are gas prices going to continue their downward trajectory that we've been on, right? It feels like this is a key data point, what happened in Kansas, but it's not a straight line to November.
It's not. And what certainly the White House is trying to say is that this issue is meaningful to a broad swath of Americans, and therefore Congress should act to codify what had been constitutionally protected under Roe, and that was, of course, overturned by the Supreme Court in June. And at the same time, we won't see on the ballot in state after state the specific question of abortion rights. What we will see are candidates who will represent differing views on access to abortion at different levels of government, and Republicans will try to turn the issue to pocketbook, the inflation, and different kinds of issues like gas prices, as you mentioned, taking it away from this issue based on state by state. The White House is going to say this is now an issue that can galvanize Democrats, can draw people to the polls, and can perhaps change the fortunes for Democrats in what historically is typically not a good year, a midterm year when a party in power usually loses seats. So events can change things, and Democrats are saying this might be a change in their favor based on how people feel very strongly about this issue. Hallie?
Kelly O'Donnell. Kelly O, thank you. Good to see you, as always. I want to get to Dasha Burns, who is posted up in Overland Park, Kansas, outside the Planned Parenthood there. And Dasha, listen, we know what the reaction was from abortion rights advocates, from abortion opponents, too. Look ahead for us. Talk about what happens next, not just in Kansas, but around the country, given this.
Well, right now, first, there is a big moment of relief for abortion providers here, like this Planned Parenthood behind me. I mean, just a few days ago, I was talking to providers here who were telling me that they were planning to prepare to have to send women as far as Colorado, New Mexico, Chicago, in order to seek this kind of care, this kind of procedure. And now they know they don't have to do that. What they will have to do, though, is have this flood of folks calling and coming to Kansas from the surrounding states to try to seek care. We were in Wichita just a few weeks ago at the Trust Women Clinic there that provides abortion care, and they are trying to expand, trying to create more space, trying to staff up, because they have received this influx of calls from these surrounding states where access is simply not available. So they are struggling to keep up with the need here in this region. That's going to continue to be a challenge. But of course, other states are looking to what happened here in Kansas and how they might be able to potentially, Hallie, replicate this kind of model, politically speaking, right?
Because in 5 more states, Democrats have been saying abortion's on the ballot all over the place. In 5 more states, it literally is. It quite literally is actually on the ballot.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You've got Michigan, you have Vermont, California, Kentucky, Montana, literally on the ballot. And, what we've been hearing from a lot of voters, Hallie, on both sides of the aisle, Democrats, Republicans, independents, is that they do want to see this kind of ballot initiative. They want to see people get the chance to vote on this issue. It's been decided in courts that there are so many legal battles happening across the country, but there is something to be said about giving voters that voice. And I'll tell you, there are so many political strategists right now in war rooms really recalibrating for the midterms, because this was so resounding, so overwhelming. And I've been speaking to people on the ground here for weeks now. Nobody expected this. The abortion rights advocates I've been talking with thought maybe at best it would be close, but they did not expect the kind of blowout that we saw here. But one of the factors I think that really played a role here, Hallie, is the messaging. On the vote yes side, the sort of anti-abortion rights side, the messaging was, this is not a ban. I talked to state representatives who would have the power to take action on abortion if this were passed, and they told me they didn't know what was coming next, that they haven't talked to people about this, right? On the other hand, the Kansans for Constitutional Freedom, the vote no side, Kansans for Constitutional Freedom, right? They were playing to moderates, to Republicans. They were making an argument that this was government overreach. And for some of the voters I talked to, that really resonated, Hallie.
Dasha Burns, thank you. So over in Arizona, they are still counting the ballots in one of the GOP races there, with right now election denier Kari Lake, whom former President Donald Trump backs, who had also claimed without evidence that there was fraud in her election before same-day ballots were even cast. She's got a slight lead over Karen Taylor Robson, just 11,000 votes. That's how close it is. And as we talk about former President Trump's grip on the party, it's clear that in Arizona, it is still strong. Candidates that he endorsed winning up and down the ballot last night. A little bit more of a mixed bag in some other states, and that GOP establishment versus Donald Trump debate is going to be on full display this weekend at Texas in CPAC. Actually starting tomorrow, with potential 2024 candidates for president and Donald Trump, who keeps teasing his potential re-election run, all under one roof. I want to bring in Vaughn Hilliard, who is on hour 97, I think, of live rolling Arizona election coverage. And Vaughn, you know, there are still votes outstanding in the governor's race. Talk to us about the implications of that race and more broadly what we've seen in Arizona, because now people are looking at these general election matchups, right? They're looking at Blake Masters, who has questioned the results, the legitimate results of the 2020 election, going up against Mark Kelly in the general. A lot of eyes now turning from last night, turning towards November.
Right. Let's just take the governor's race real fast to get that out of the way, Hallie. Kari Lake, NBC News has not called the race for her, but she has a marginal lead here against Karen Taylor Robson, and we expect that to expand here. The votes that are outstanding, anywhere from 150,000 ballots or more. These ballots were mainly those folks who received mail ballots at home, but then walked them in and dropped them off at the polling place on Election Day. The folks that are even more skeptical of the mail-in voting system than others. And these folks generally lean towards Kari Lake. So we're expecting her to expand her margin of her lead right now. But when we were looking at the rest of these races, we've already called it for Abe Hamadeh, for Attorney General. He's the Trump-endorsed candidate. Mark Fincham, the Trump-endorsed candidate for Secretary of State. And you said it here, Blake Masters. This is a remaking of the Republican Party here in Arizona. And I actually just tossed the question out to Kari Lake here at a press conference just a bit ago. How is she going to, or is she having any desire to try to reach out to Doug Ducey or Mark Brnovich or the McCain family, who she continually went after here over the course of the last year and a half? And she equated it to a dysfunctional family, and that everybody ultimately will come back together around the Republican cause. Of course, she took very personal jabs at these individuals, but it's not unlike what we saw Donald Trump do a few years ago. And ultimately, he built an entire national party around him, Hallie.
I think about, when you talk about the Republican cause, Vaughn, I think about what is going to be on display at CPAC, which starts tomorrow in Texas. You'll see, you know, this week and this weekend, Senator Ted Cruz from Texas, Governor Greg Abbott from there, Florida Senator Rick Scott, people rumored to be considering presidential runs in 2024. And I think about the message that these primary results are sending to that conference.
That these primary results are sending to these individuals is that the folks who are going to be in the United States Congress next year, but also working at a statewide level, are loyalists to Donald Trump. John Gibbs in Michigan, who just took out Peter Meyer, he has Donald Trump to thank. Kari Lake has Donald Trump to thank. Mark Fincham has Donald Trump to thank. You know, Eric Schmidt can even make the case that he's got Donald Trump to thank. And you look across the country, Mehmet Oz, J.D. Vance, their political relevancy is tied to Donald Trump, and he'll be the first one to remind them of that. And so when you get to a potential 2024 primary, when you and I are in Iowa in the dead of winter there, and if any of these individuals were to try to take on Donald Trump, the apparatus that Donald Trump would expect to have around him would be sizable. And as of right now, that even includes the national party that is stuck by him here. The next year, that's a big question mark. Would anybody actually try to step out and step away from him?
Vaughn Hilliard, live for us in Phoenix, Arizona. Don't act like you don't love being in Iowa in the dead of winter, Vaughn. I know you. I see you. Thank you, friend. Appreciate it.
It's essentially like Phoenix in the dead of summer, right?
I'm sure. In battleground Michigan, the Trump endorsement won big there on the GOP side. Tudor Dixon got the nomination in the governor's race in this primary after only getting the former president's endorsement late last week. She'll face off. It's an uphill battle against current Democratic Governor Gretchen Whitmer in November. And then you have the Donald Trump so-called revenge tour and incumbent Congressman Peter Meijer, who voted to impeach Donald Trump, losing his primary to the Trump-endorsed candidate, John Gibbs. Over in Missouri, the battle of the Erics. Remember, Donald Trump endorsed Eric, no last name. Turns out it was Eric Schmidt, the attorney general in that state, winning the Republican nomination for that open Senate seat over controversial former Governor Eric Greitens and Congresswoman Vicky Hartzler. So that's the world of politics. Let's talk about what else is happening in the universe, because this next story, it is the #1 trending topic on Twitter right now because of the drama of this Law and Order moment at the defamation trial of conspiracy theorist Alex Jones. The jury is deliberating now about how much money he should have to pay to Sandy Hook parents after lying that the horrific mass shooting there was simply a hoax. And this defamation trial, if you know anything about Alex Jones or InfoWars, it's going about exactly as you might expect here, with a lot of drama, disruptions. The judge has repeatedly had to tell Jones to stop lying under oath. And then there's the moment that I think had jaws dropping among people who are watching this, who are covering this. I'm just going to play it for you and you'll see it. Watch.
Your attorneys messed up and sent me an entire digital copy of your entire cell phone with every text message you've sent for the past 2 years. And as of 2 days ago, it fell free and clear into my possession. And that is how I know you lied to me. Mr. Jones, in discovery, you were asked, do you have Sandy Hook text messages on your phone? And you said no, correct? You said that under oath, Mr. Jones, didn't you?
I mean, if I was mistaken, but you got the messages right there.
You know what perjury is, right?
Okay, you caught that? Jones's lawyers accidentally sent the entire contents of Jones's phone to the opposition, to the prosecutors here, who then are using it to show that Jones lied. The InfoWars host says he now understands it was irresponsible of him to suggest that the Sandy Hook massacre was a hoax, that he now believes it was 100% real. But keep in mind, he's already been found liable for defaming the parents of a 6-year-old who was among the 20 students and 6 educators killed in that 2012 attack. I want to bring in Ben Collins now. So, Ben, let me start with sort of that moment, because not only was it text messages that Jones has sent for the last couple of years, critically important, it was financial documents that people didn't know a lot about. There had been this open question mark of, like, how much does InfoWars make? Because this directly relates to what the jury has to decide, is how much financially should Alex Jones be punished for lying about Sandy Hook?
Yeah, and we've been looking for years. As a reporter, I specifically have been looking for years for how much InfoWars makes, just so we know what kind of empire we're working with here. And it shocked me. It's a lot bigger than I thought. There are days, they say, where they took in $800,000 a day in income. So that's extrapolated, it's $300 million a year. That's like half a New York Times, basically. It's an enormous media operation that I had no idea it was this big, frankly. And Alex Jones has been pretending to be bankrupt for the last couple of weeks. He's been saying for the last few weeks that, anything over $2 million will make it so InfoWars won't exist anymore. He's trying to get out of this $150 million settlement in this much larger conversation about whether or not he's allowed to defame these families, say they didn't exist, say they were crisis actors, say the kids were part of a much larger plot or something like that. He did that for years, and he did that longer than we thought. We learned that today. Part of these text messages show he was doing this for 5 years after the Sandy Hook shooting itself. The Sandy Hook parents' lawyer said at the beginning of this trial that speech is free,
but lies you have to pay for. That's what this is about, right? $150 million in damage that could send potentially a real message, right? But I think about the parents. I think about what we've heard from the parents of this little boy who have had to endure such horrific heartbreak and grief. And then on top of that, for almost a decade, have been living kind of a nightmare with Jones's InfoWars supporters and conspiracy theorists going after them constantly.
Yeah, and the argument from Jones's lawyers, by the way, is that Alex Jones had nothing to do with this, that truthers exist separate of him, even though he had one, like the biggest Sandy Hook truther on his show once or a couple times. You know, he had nothing to do with it, that really people like Megyn Kelly or the mainstream media had more to do with this than somebody who believes that almost every single mass shooting, at least at the start, floats the idea that it's done secretly by the CIA or the FBI as a way to, you know, go and grab everyone's guns. And if that's the plan, then it's taken way too long, frankly. It's taken the entire time InfoWars has been up and running for, you know, decades now. But the interesting part of this trial is that this judge is just over it. This judge has, first of all, Alex Jones all week has been railing against this judge in real time on InfoWars. There was a video of her literally on fire, and Alex Jones said that you know, she was supposed to be the stand-in for liberty in this case, that liberty is burning, not the judge herself, but still. But this judge had sort of let him have it here. And this is one of the first times anyone has ever told Alex Jones to his face to stop talking, and he really did it.
Do you understand what I have said? Yes or no? Do you understand what I have said?
Yes, I believe what I said was true. So
yes, you believe everything you say is true, but it isn't. Your beliefs do not make something true. That is what we're doing here. Just because you claim to think something is true does not make it true.
And that's the much larger picture with Alex Jones. Right. He claims to think pretty much everything is true that isn't true, and vice versa, just to create confusion in people's minds. But there are real people on the other side of that story. We saw some of those in court this week.
Tell me more about what we heard from those family members and about how many people are watching this, because this is just one of the trials that Alex Jones is dealing with here. He's got another one, I think, set to start in September next month. Yeah, this is one of 3 defamation trials. And, you know, the parents this week talked specifically about how they've had to move around, how they've had to, abandon their previous lives, how they've dedicated their lives to making sure something like this doesn't happen again. It's pretty harrowing. And, you know, one of them offered Alex Jones a bottle of water yesterday after the trial. And that whole interaction wound up with him screaming at, you know, that woman who lost a 6-year-old in Sandy Hook and her lawyers, saying that she was being manipulated with fake videos. And again, that's Alex Jones saying that. That is one of the greatest ironies that there is. But that's what happens when you put Alex Jones in a courtroom. It's just the same thing. It's the same character on screen as you see in real life. Ben Collins, I know you're staying on top of this one for us. Thank you very much for bringing us that reporting. Appreciate it. To Illinois now, where more than 24 people showed up in court today for the arraignment of the suspect in the 4th of July parade massacre in Highland Park. No cameras were allowed in court, but our team was in there. They were inside. They tell us he didn't say much, although he did plead not guilty to 117 charges against him. The 21-year-old is accused of shooting and killing 7 people and hurting more than 40 others. Family members of the victims and people who went to the parade that day sat behind prosecutors. They say they wanted to be there to make sure justice is served.
To be able to sit in the courtroom and know that my town, the people from my town matter, and what happened to them matters, and that we are here to make sure that justice is carried out.
If convicted on the charges of first-degree murder, the suspect faces life in prison without the possibility of parole. To Kentucky now, where we are starting to hear stories of survivors who were trapped in their homes during devastating flooding by floating furniture that was blocking the doorways, basically. These harrowing stories of survivors here. Some of these people describing the experience as surreal, having to get through waist-deep water to try to get to loved ones, only to be turned back because the current was just too strong. Many say everything they owned was either taken or destroyed by the water, and now the same community faces yet another weather threat, and that is extreme heat. They just can't catch a break. A heat advisory has been issued in eastern Kentucky from noon today through tomorrow night, according to the National Weather Service. It includes the areas that were hit hardest by these awful floods. The Kentucky governor, Andy Beshear, is opening up 8 cooling centers around eastern Kentucky. Because think about it, with people who don't have power, if you don't have AC, and now this really hot weather's on the way, that could be deadly, too. I want to bring in NBC's George Solis, who is joining us now from Kentucky with the latest. George, talk about how the heat is complicating the rescue factor here.
Yeah, Hallie, like you said, the people here just can't catch a break, and people are now just able to return to their homes and start assessing what they've lost. Here on the property that I'm standing on, the homeowner allowing us to show you just a glimpse of the destruction. And this is just a slice of what we've been seeing around the region. This is the foundation of a home that was completely swept away. Where is it now? Well, it's right behind me. And these homeowners at least have the advantage of knowing where their home is. As you alluded, some properties completely swept away, and that's only part of the problem. Yes, it's been almost a week, not a little week, more than a week actually, since that floodwater started to come in. And you still have areas like this where there is still standing water. Now, fortunately here, that's not impeding with any search and rescue effort. But you can imagine if the water is here in areas where there have been roads and bridges that have washed away, there are people that are still trying to get help at this point, which is why the National Guard is still here on the ground along with other federal task force rushing to get help to the people, get them food, get them water, especially under these sweltering heat conditions. Fortunately, there is a little bit of shade right now, so the heat hasn't been as bad, but throughout the day, it has been blistering hot. And again, with those cooling centers now open, at least those people have the advantage. The other part of this, some federal aid is finally starting to pop up here in the area. The governor declaring those mobile registration sites open, which is going to be so crucial for these people who are trying to recover everything they've lost. Hallie?
George Solis live for us out there on the ground. George, it's good to see you. Thank you. So the sun is getting ready to come up over in Asia right now, where House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is in South Korea. She left Taiwan, you know, but even though she's no longer there, the consequences for that visit could keep up long after she gets back home to the United States. You've got Beijing making more threats, potentially launching a series of military exercises around Taiwan. Taiwan already says it had to scramble fighter jets to warn off 27 Chinese planes in its air defense zone. European allies reacting to the tension, too. The G7 putting out a statement telling China basically to chill, right? That there is no need to react with force over Pelosi's trip. Pelosi sharing a statement after her visit to Taipei, saying America's solidarity with the people of Taiwan is more important today than ever. Again, the relationship between the U.S. and China is already at a place where there is a lot of concern. Taiwan is a flashpoint in that relationship. Louise Watt is in Taipei for us. So, Louise, tell me about what you're hearing there. Are people worried that China is going to kind of keep up with these military threats and potentially escalate even more?
So people expect more pressure, that's for sure. I'm not sure they're particularly worried because bear in mind, Taiwanese have put up with threats from their huge neighbor for many, many years. But certainly we're already seeing consequences happening across military, economic. Also, Taiwan's government is warning people to be on guard for stepped up cyber warfare campaigns, disinformation campaigns on social media. So I think what's clear is certainly there will be a lot of fallout from Pelosi's visit here, but it will probably mostly be on Taiwan rather than the US, even though, of course, relations will be affected over in Washington as well.
One thing that people haven't talked about so much is we talked a lot about the military exercises, Beijing looking to start up 4 days of those. But what about the shipping delays to and from Taiwan? Talk about that impact, what it would mean, and the targeting involved here.
Yes, so China has put out locations for their military exercises, which Taiwan says actually more or less it amounts to a blockade of the island. But you're right, what hasn't been talked about so much is the effect internationally, because the Taiwan Strait is one of the world's busiest waterways. So much of global shipping goes through there. Ships pick up goods from main hubs in Asia, so China, Japan, South Korea, and they transport them to Europe and the US and many other points in between as well. So certainly shipping companies are assessing what should they be doing over the next few days. I think at the very least we can expect it to prompt delays in shipping. Certainly companies have the options to take other routes, but that adds on time and expense. But I think, generally speaking, this is also going to bring attention back to the fact that the Taiwan Strait is a very strategically important location in the world. And I think people have been warning for many years that if a conflict does break out, the consequences will go much further than the region.
It's an important point, Louise. We're glad to have you there in Taipei for us. Thank you so much for being on the show. Coming up, former White House counsel Pat Cipollone subpoenaed in the January 6th investigation by the Department of Justice. What else they hope they can learn from him? Coming up. Plus, new just into us, the NFL plans to appeal the 6-game suspension handed out to Deshaun Watson. Why it means he may miss more games, coming up. We're learning tonight a federal grand jury has subpoenaed former White House counsel Pat Cipollone, according to a source familiar with the matter, as part of the Justice Department's investigation into the January 6th attack on the Capitol and the push by former President Trump to overturn the legitimate results of the 2020 election. Now, the DOJ is not officially commenting on the subpoena, but we know that Congresswoman Liz Cheney has described Cipollone as a critical witness to a different but parallel investigation, the Select Committee's congressional investigation. You're looking at Cipollone. You probably remember this from watching hearing coverage. This is his deposition. It was videotaped. We saw a lot of it during those hearings this summer. I want to bring in now Ken Delaney. And so, Ken, I want to be super clear. This is, people watch the hearings. That was the January 6th Select Committee in Congress. Right. What we're talking about now is the grand jury that is part of the DOJ investigation, separate Justice Department criminal investigation into this. We already kind of know. I mean, don't they kind of know what Pat Cipollone is going to say? They've seen the videotape stuff just like everybody else, presumably. Talk about the significance of the subpoena.
Well, first of all, he's the highest-ranking former White House official that we know of who's been called to testify before this grand jury. And we're just sort of saying it like it's a normal thing, but it's only been in recent weeks that we've really learned that the Justice Department is now scrutinizing the actions of President Trump and the people around him as they sought to overturn the election. That is a huge deal. We're still sort of beginning to digest it. And now they've got the White House counsel. And you're absolutely right. They know a lot of what he's going to say because they've already, presumably, they got the transcripts of everything he's told the January 6th committee. But there's an important distinction, Hallie. There were certain questions that he would not answer before that congressional committee because he cited both attorney-client privilege and executive privilege. And most legal experts believe he will not be able to do that successfully in the face of a federal grand jury.
That's super interesting. And tell me more about that, because why couldn't he invoke executive privilege in that setting?
Well, he could, and he probably will.
Okay, that's what I'm saying. So, go ahead. I wanted to remind people what executive privilege is, but you're going to do that, so go ahead.
The executive privilege is the notion that certain advisors to the president shouldn't be forced to disclose their innermost conversations because the president deserves to have unfettered advice that he knows isn't going to be, sort of brought before a congressional committee or even in, other kinds of investigations. But in the Nixon case in Watergate and in more recent cases in the Clinton administration, courts have ruled that a federal criminal investigation overcomes executive privilege in almost all cases. And it also would overcome an attorney-client privilege, because it's the president's privilege. So it might be Joe Biden's privilege, actually, to decide whether there's attorney-client privilege. Pat Cipollone didn't represent Donald Trump personally. He represented the president. So we already know that he's a sympathetic witness to this investigation. He testified that he tried to stop Trump, and he thought that what was happening was terrible in terms of what happened on January 6th and some of the efforts to overturn. He is likely, most people think, to try to force the DOJ to litigate just because of the principle of the thing. As a lawyer, you don't want to sort of willingly just forget about those privileges, but he will lose, and then he will be required to answer very crucial questions about Donald Trump's state of mind. Because if the Justice Department ever decides to prosecute Donald Trump, they will have to prove that he had criminal intent, that he knew he didn't win the election, but he still pursued these fraud claims, for example. And Pat Cipollone may be a key witness to give them that evidence.
Hey, Ken, real quick before we let you go, let me turn to this other piece of developing news out of the DOJ, that they've filed a civil lawsuit now against another former Trump advisor, Peter Navarro, asking him to turn over records having to do with a personal email account that he used for official White House business during the Trump administration. We know you're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to use your Gmail when you're dealing with White House stuff. You use your .gov email. What's the DOJ's game plan here? What are they getting at?
So it's really interesting because he's under indictment for contempt of Congress, right? So his lawyers are saying that, hey, this isn't quite fair. You know, you're trying to use this civil case to get these records that you want for your criminal case. But the bottom line here is that the Presidential Records Act requires him to turn over these records because they are, at least according to the DOJ's reading of it, because he was using this Proton encrypted email address, the DOJ says, for official business. And if that's true, then those are presidential records. Now, it's interesting that they went the civil route. There are federal criminal penalties for violating that act, but they're suing him civilly, suggesting that they don't at least have evidence or don't want to show evidence that he had criminal intent. They just want the records. Hallie.
Ken Delanian, thank you for that breakdown. Appreciate it. Let's get you over now to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, Indiana Republican Congresswoman Jackie Walorski has been killed in a car crash this afternoon. She was 58 years old. House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy confirmed her death. Sad news tonight. She was first elected to Congress in 2012. 3 others were also killed in the crash. A lot of thoughts and prayers out of Washington for her family. Number 2, Rudy Giuliani is not expected to face charges in a federal lobbying investigation, according to 3 people familiar with the matter. This is an NBC News scoop from our colleague Tom Winter. The nearly 2-year investigation had been looking into what Giuliani was doing with Ukraine. He was accused of relying on Ukrainian officials and lawmakers to try and dig up dirt about Joe Biden and his family while the then candidate was running for president. The investigation's not over yet. Giuliani has told NBC News he is happy about the prospect of being cleared. Number 3, the White House releasing some new numbers, new reporting on long COVID today with information on the federally funded resources that are available for people who are sick and the research being done to study long COVID. The Biden administration says more still has to be done to really understand how long COVID works and what can be done to fix it. Number 4, the NFL is appealing the Cleveland Browns quarterback Deshaun Watson's 6-game suspension. Multiple reports say the league wanted him out for at least a year because of dozens of allegations of sexual misconduct against him. A lawyer for some of the alleged victims saying to the NFL, it's never too late to do the right thing. Watson's team has not responded just yet. And number 5, Vin Scully. You've probably seen this news today because we learned about it overnight. Vin Scully, the voice of the Dodgers for more than 6 decades, has died. He was 94 years old. The man behind the mic is some of baseball's biggest moments, right? All the way back to when the Dodgers were in Brooklyn. In 1982, he got into the Baseball Hall of Fame and Museum. In 2016, President Obama, at the time, then President Obama, awarded him the Presidential Medal of Freedom. The team announced his death on Twitter, calling him the heartbeat of the Dodgers and in so many ways, the heartbeat of all of LA. When we come back, Phil Mickelson and some other LIV Tour golfers suing the PGA Tour, saying it's trying to crush overseas competition and punish the players like him who are a part of it. We're going to get into this drama in the world of golf coming up after the break. So imagine doing some job and then publicly getting a second job with a competitor and then saying, hey, original job, you still have to keep me on your payroll. That is kind of what might be happening in the golf world. There's been this real drama, this feud for about a year between the LIV golf circuit and the PGA Tour. LIV, of course, backed by the Saudis, the PGA Tour here in the U.S. And today, 11 golfers working the LIV golf circuit, including Phil Mickelson, very famous golfer, they filed an antitrust lawsuit against the PGA Tour after they got suspended from that tour. The suit alleges the PGA used their control of the golf market to tank their controversial LIV Golf Series competitors. Timing of this coincides with the PGA tournament, which starts tomorrow. There's millions of dollars in victory money on the line here in a legal fight that could have a domino effect across not just golf, but the entire sports world. I want to bring in Corey Robinson, our sports analyst here for the night. Corey, I'm glad to have you on with us for the show. Talk to us about this lawsuit and kind of what's behind it here, because it is particularly timed to this sort of big moment in the PGA Tour. And there's a lot of sort of backstory to this, too.
The backstory is akin to probably one of the best dramas that I've seen or read recently. Basically, what we have is a full-blown war. Hallie. It all started with the inception of LIV, but it started to really hit a fever pitch when basically June, when the first LIV golf tournament was in London, and the PGA Tour was forced to make a decision, and they did. And they said they basically denied conflicting event releases to all their players, which then prompted a response. And you had a couple of different ways to look at it. You had one, which was players like voluntarily resigning their PGA Tour memberships, players like major winners like Sergio Garcia and Dustin Johnson, in an effort to preempt any disciplinary action by the PGA Tour. Then you had some players who were like, let's kind of wait and see what happens. Let's stick our fanfare with the PGA Tour for a little bit and then defect later. And that's what Bryson DeChambeau did. And then you had the staunch supporters of like Rory McIlroy and Tiger Woods said, we're PGA Tour all the way. Basically, the lawsuit is fundamentally about this idea of, are you a full-time employee of the PGA Tour or are you an independent contractor? The PGA Tour states that you were once our employee and you could enjoy our benefits. Now you're no longer our employee, so you can't enjoy our benefits. And the LIV Golfers attorneys are stating otherwise, saying, no, our professional golfers are independent contractors, and you're impeding, and the quote is, you're providing irreparable harm, end quote, to their careers and their ability to pursue sponsorships.
You mentioned Tiger Woods, right, who's been sort of a staunch PGA-er, if you will. He turned down an offer of something reportedly like $700 million. That is a lot of dollars, right, to go over to the LIV Golf circuit. Tell us more about this and about the potential ripple effects of this kind of feud, as we talked about, between LIV and PGA. Corey has frozen. We're so sad because that was a cliffhanger, but we're thrilled to Corey for bringing his expertise here, one of our NBC sports hosts and analysts. So listen, we're going to stay on top of that story. What is going to go down with Phil Mickelson, with LIV Golf, with PGA? We'll be all over it. Coming up, we're all over a couple of other stories, too, including a scary one out of Alabama. A girl found on a road, leading authorities to 2 bodies. The charges so far in this case, next in the local. NBC News covers hundreds of stories every day, and because you couldn't possibly read or watch or listen to them all, our bureau teams have done it for you. This is what they tell us is going down in their regions in a segment we call The Local. From our Southeast Bureau, Alabama officials say a 12-year-old girl found walking on a road led to the discovery of 2 bodies and a kidnapping arrest. Our affiliate in Montgomery reports court records indicate the girl had been tied up and drugged with alcohol before she managed to escape. We don't know the connection between the girl, the man who was charged, or the people who had died who were found. Authorities say the suspect could also face murder charges. Out of our West Coast Bureau, today Nancy Pelosi's husband, Paul Pelosi, pleaded not guilty to DUI charges. Police say the 82-year-old was involved in a crash back in May. The DA's office says a blood sample taken from him afterwards showed his blood alcohol content was .082, the legal limit, .08. Pelosi's due back in court later this month. From our Northeast Bureau, a teen in Pennsylvania jumping right into action to help his neighbors escape an apartment building fire. A 17-year-old telling our affiliate in Pittsburgh that he and another neighbor dragged a trampoline from the yard to, catch people as they jumped out of windows, bounce them on the trampoline, get them to safety. Some of the people got hurt a little bit. No one was seriously hurt, thank goodness. Time now to get the backstory, our behind-the-scenes look at how a story comes together and how it fits into our bigger picture. And not too long ago, we saw the Senate Finance Committee on Capitol Hill saying that mistakes in the organ transplant process led to the deaths of dozens of patients. 249 of them developed diseases between 2008 and 2015, and more than a quarter of them died. Why? Well, the committee says part of the reason is because of lax oversight by the United Network for Organ Sharing, or UNOS. That's the contractor that oversees, how organizations get and then transplant organs. The investigation finding instances of careless treatment of donated organs, organs lost in transit, lots of tech issues. It comes after the Washington Post reported on a confidential government review that found similar problems at UNOS, with thousands of lives depending on transplant technology that apparently needs a lot of fixing. Right? This report found the mechanics of that entire transplant system have never even been audited by government officials for security problems or other issues. It's crashed repeatedly for hours at a time. In a statement to NBC News, UNOS, this United Network for Organ Sharing, says we vehemently disagree with the findings of this USDS report and the way in which the Washington Post reported the story. Lenny Bernstein from the Washington Post is behind that story, reported on all of this. Lenny, we're so glad that you're able to join us for the backstory. Thank you. And it really is, I know this is your first time on the show, it really is a look behind the scenes at how you actually did the reporting, right? So how did it come to be, Lenny, that you first started looking into this issue? Let me start there.
The dispute over whether the organ transplant system functions well has been going on for decades. Critics and activists have been saying that organs are lost, that organ procurement organizations don't pick up enough organs, and there has been a back and forth for decades. I wrote some stories about this back 3-4 years ago. The committee has been doing a a 2.5-year investigation. The Senate Finance Committee, which you just showed, has been doing a 2.5-year investigation of many aspects of that. That came out at a hearing today. So we began to poke around and look to see what we could find on the whole system. And the result was the story you put up, the one on Sunday, and then another one today.
And so much of it, too, is based on some of these documents that you were able to get access to. Pull back the curtain a little bit. Is that from, and I know you can't say too much about it, but relationship building, working sources? How did you keep track of so much of this data, right? What did your workflow even look like?
Well, yeah, we can't talk about sourcing. We don't let people know where we get information from. It's basically what reporters do, which is that when you're interested in a story and you've been writing about it for years, you just keep in touch with people who know what's going on. And so I've just been talking to all the folks who I talked to years ago about what was new, what was going on. I was aware that the committee was doing this investigation, and it became time to sort of drop what I was doing on other things and look into what was going on, what had they found new, because I hadn't written on this in a while. And then, eventually you gather this material, you find out that something is going on or somebody's done a report, a credible report, and you're able to get your hands on it.
In the course of your reporting, Lenny, did anything surprise you as you talked with doctors who have had to deal with some of the issues raised in this report firsthand?
Well, so much of this surprised me. Even having looked into this before, I was really stunned by the description of the technology. It is rickety, it crashes, it is hard to use. Data is hidden. So sometimes there's a critical report that a surgeon wants to access and they can't find it. It relies on hand entered material in a day when hospitals have electronic health records basically everywhere. Then you come to find out that mistakes made in both communication and transport and the screening of organs are responsible for people contracting diseases from the very organs that were supposed to save their lives. And you don't expect that. That is very surprising. The number is also surprising. According to UNOS, 70 over the course of 7.5 years.
Lenny Bernstein of The Washington Post. Lenny, thank you so much for giving us an inside look at how this story comes together. It is an important read, and I commend folks to it at the Post. Thanks, Lenny. Appreciate you being on.
My pleasure.
Still to come. Batgirl is not going to make it to the big screen or any screen. Why its studio won't release it, even though they spent tens of millions of dollars to shoot the thing. They filmed it already. We're talking about it after the break. New reaction tonight from the directors of the movie Batgirl, hoping to get some answers on why Warner Brothers decided to just basically chuck the movie in the trash after they already spent $90 million on it. The directors are saying they're shocked, they're saddened by the news, adding that even though there was still work to do, they wish fans could have had the opportunity to see and embrace the final film for themselves. And listen, superhero movies, they usually make big money, sometimes billions of dollars. But not only will Batgirl not make the big screen, it will be on no screens. Warner Brothers isn't even putting it on their streaming service, HBO Max. Alex Sherman covers media and tech for CNBC. Explain this, Alex, because this doesn't happen in the movie business. I get that Warner has pulled the plug on expensive projects before. They just did it with CNN Plus. Variety saying taxes might be part of this, but if you've already sunk $90 million into it, why not just stick it somewhere and see how it goes?
So, yeah, this is a weird quirk of the Discovery Warner Media merger. And it actually, you mentioned CNN Plus. It has a lot of similar themes to CNN Plus, even though it's a movie rather than a streaming network. The explanation, as far as I understand it, is that this was a movie that was actually ticketed to go on HBO Max. So the plan originally by the previous administration at Warner Media was never to go theatrical. In fact, that was the plan for all of the Warner Media movies, you may remember, in 2021 during the pandemic. So when the new leadership, after the merger was consummated back in May, came into power, they looked at this movie and they decided, you know what, strategically, we don't think that a big superhero movie should go straight to HBO Max. We think it should go theatrical. And this movie is not good enough to go theatrical. It needs more work. They aired a director's cut for a studio audience. They didn't like it, so they were going to need to pump more money into it. And it wasn't even meant for the big screen to begin with. So then they had two options: put it on HBO Max, or they could trash it and take a big tax write-down. So that is what the leadership decided to do. And by the way, this isn't the only movie they decided to do that with. The new Scooby-Doo sequel, they came to the same conclusion. Don't put it on HBO Max. Instead, we'll take the write-down and we'll end the movie, even though tens of millions of dollars were already spent on it.
I feel like that helps make a little bit more sense of it, because I think the obvious question is like, listen, who cares if it's like a lot of, you said they think it's not good enough. Alex, plenty of not good movies are out. Like, that's not a bar. When is that a bar for like releasing movies, right?
Sure.
You know what I mean? So you would think we would just do it, but I guess if they're looking at the bottom line, do you think this is going to mean less content going forward from them if this is sort of the standard?
So, and by the way, this was just a director's cut that was released, and a lot of director's cuts are not very good. And most of the time what happens there is you get your creative team in there and they give you notes, and then they make the movie better by the time it hits the audience. So will there be a potential backlash here? Obviously to be determined, but I think what Warner Media will say, or Warner Brothers Discovery, as that company is now called, they probably will get the message out to directors and talent that this was just a weird quirk. They took over a movie that they didn't believe in, that was made by a bunch of leaders that are no longer at the company, and that this was just an unfortunate one-off as the Warner Brothers Discovery team looks to cut costs from that merger. They've already said they're trying to cut $3 billion of costs. This gets back to the similarities of CNN+. That also was a large cost-cutting effort for a project that was inherited by the current leadership that they simply didn't believe in. So you can chalk this one up to that category as well.
Alex Sherman with all things on the business of the film industry. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. It's good to see you. That does it for us for this hour. We're going to have more for you here tomorrow, same time, same place. Glad you're with us. Coverage picks up right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.